Thanks, Nisa, and welcome to On-Chain Reaction. I'm Philip Gradwell, the Chief Economist at Chainalysis, here to show you what's been happening on the blockchain. And for those of you who've been following for a few weeks, we've changed the format ever so slightly. Previously, we had looked at the last 7 days from Sunday. Now we're looking at the last 7 days from Tuesday. And I'm glad that we're doing that this week, because on Tuesday this week, the Bitcoin price, which has been rising recently, suddenly pumped up to $10,000 before swiftly falling back to $9,500. And if we look at the on-chain inflows, well, they'd actually continued the trend that we'd seen last week of being low relative to historical averages. That is until Tuesday, the 2nd of June, when all of a sudden they doubled with 65,000 Bitcoin more than average going into exchanges. And that's interesting. Price goes above 10,000, people seem to rush to the exchanges to sell. Perhaps why that price pump wasn't able to be maintained. We've also looked in previous weeks at the increase of balances of Bitcoin on exchanges. And this week, we've got the clearest signal yet that those balances are increasing. Even at the lower bound of our estimates of Bitcoin going into exchanges, we're seeing increases day by day. So there's more and more Bitcoin being stored on exchanges. And what's interesting is that that Bitcoin is being traded less frequently. So if we look at the trade intensity measure, that's the ratio of the number of Bitcoin traded for every Bitcoin received on chain, that number has actually dropped when we look at the 7-day average. So that Bitcoin that's being stockpiled on exchanges is not being traded as frequently as we might expect, suggesting people might be just waiting to see what's going to happen. And Tether has also seen an increase in balances on exchanges, actually reversing something that we saw last week, which for me was a bearish signal, the fact that there was less dry powder, less Tether on exchanges to buy Bitcoin. This week, we're actually seeing those balances build up. So perhaps now people are waiting to buy if the prices fall. So on the Bitcoin side, you've got people building up their stocks, perhaps waiting to sell. And on the Tether side, you've got people building up Tether, waiting to buy. If we look at the flows between exchanges, well, then we see that actually the flows between exchanges have declined across the board in the last week. There's less Bitcoin flowing between different types of exchanges. However, there's been an increase in the flows to derivatives exchanges. They had a net inflow of $58 million this last week, suggesting that people are taking some bigger positions on the futures market. So what does this all mean? Well, more assets are staying on exchanges with fewer assets moving between them. And the price has been rising and is expected to keep on rising. If you look at the forward curve on futures, people expect the Bitcoin price to be higher in the future than it is today. However, the supply of assets on exchanges may put a ceiling on those gains. We saw that this week when Bitcoin went over $10,000. There are a lot of Bitcoin sitting on exchanges. More Bitcoin came to the exchanges, promptly sold, and put the price back down below $10,000. So for me, I think people really appear ready for the market to go either way. Some people think there might be a breakout. Some people seem to be getting ready to see the prices fall further, ready with their tether to buy Bitcoin. And I think people are really waiting to see how crypto responds to the dramatic macro events that are happening around us, to see whether actually they generate demand for Bitcoin or actually if Bitcoin is left on the side. So perhaps this week, it's less a story of what's actually happening on chain and what is happening out there in the rest of the world.